You're listening to Big World Network.
Autumn Harvest, Maiden, Episode 1. Written by Toph Eklund. Read by Twan Krakowski. Glittering gold, blood red, sunset orange, and the brown of a peasant's tan, the leaves fall over Thryce. The seasons here are so pronounced, unlike in my homeland, where it is either warm and rainy or cold and rainy, but it hardly ever snows. My name is Elena, and I am a sister of the order, a witch. Witchcraft is still illegal in Thryce, punishable by death. The air is not yet cold, but I shiver and wrap my arms around my swollen belly. Soon I won't be able to disguise it any more. Soon the snows will come and trap me here in the castle. Soon I will be stranded, a pregnant witch in the capital of a backwards, fearful country. I should feel horribly alone, but I do not. In magic, 6 parts of 8 are divination, but of that, only 1 part in 20 is true foretelling. Scrying the future is difficult, exhausting, and unreliable. On the other hand, scrying the present is as natural to a witch as breathing. In the order, we have a saying, if you understand the present, you know the future. My third eye is keener than most, so I was sent to Thryce to observe the weirding take place here. Weird is a destiny, the thread of fate that binds us all, and the order pays close attention to those with great destinies. A little less than 3 centuries ago, a boy was born accompanied by the most powerful weirding in memory. When that boy grew up, he proclaimed himself High King, conquered most of the known world, and killed thousands of women on suspicion of witchcraft. Thryce cleaves closer to the laws of the High King than do most of the other nations that were part of his empire. The archaic witchcraft tests were a mere inconvenience, but the restrictions on women outside the palace are a daily offense to my senses. In public, women must keep their hair covered and show no skin below the neck. These rules apply at court as well, but there, access to the best fabrics, tailors, and haberdashers make this more of an occasion for fashion than anything else. Outside the palace walls, if a single lock of hair escapes from a tightly drawn cowl or snood, the offending woman's head is shaved and she is placed in the stocks for a week. Worse, any woman who has skin-to-skin contact with a man outside her family can be executed for carnal indecency. The current king of Thryce, Lycius, is considered enlightened for requiring that all witchcraft and indecency cases go before a magistrate, but one still hears of women being stoned to death by mobs, and worse. Upon my arrival at the court of King Lycius, I had to pass their archaic witchcraft tests. I passed the 3 tests easily, as the water test and the blood test are pure superstition, and the test of iron detects only magics of a kind rarely practiced anymore. Therefore, under Thrycian law, I am not a witch, and what I do is not witchcraft. This has not made me feel safe. All Thracian women who can afford them wear gloves. Gloves are the signature item in the noblewoman's wardrobe, and the most talked about. In the palace, even the lowliest handmaiden has gloves of very fine cotton, richly embroidered on the back of the hand and up the sleeve, which usually runs all the way to the elbow. Those of more consequence wear silk gloves, dyed to match their outfits and embroidered with silver or gold thread, and sometimes incorporating precious stones, or, more daringly, open lacework. I used a large portion of my annual allowance from the order to purchase as simple a pair as my post allowed for, half elbow-length white cotton with flowering lavender embroidery. The rest of my kit is extremely simple by Thrycian standards, consisting of high-necked dresses of simple cut in the traditional ochre and terracotta colors worn by maidens of the order, slips, stockings, and unfashionably comfortable shoes. One of the gifts of the power is long life. I came to Thryce in my 5th decade of life, but I seem half that age to them. Being close to 30 in their eyes makes me well past marriageable age, though not old enough to spare me the advances of men of importance and, on rare occasion, ladies at court. I am taller than most Thrycians, probably due to a better diet, and dark-skinned compared to their covered women and upper classes. My eyes are light brown and my hair is almost black in a country where green eyes, pale skin, and dirty blonde or strawberry hair are markers of nobility. Since coming to Thryce, I have learned that my curly hair straightens, tangles, and frizzes when it is very dry. During the frozen heart of winter, keeping it contained and covered becomes a maddening task. Even discounting my skin tone, my nose is too broad, my lips too thin, and my thighs too thick for me to be attractive by their standards, so I must presume that the occasional proposals I receive are due entirely to my being exotic. While I am past marriageable age by Thrycian standards, I am still young according to the order. I am in the first third of my life, which we call maidenhood. Some crones are old enough to remember the tyrannical reign of the original High King. On the other hand, in Thryce, adulthood begins at 12, and marriages are often arranged ahead of time, so the sight of pregnant 13-year-old girls has ceased to surprise me. Sometimes the upper classes postpone the consummation of marriage a few years, but a woman past 20 is unlikely to find a husband, and this is a dire circumstance in a society in which women are forbidden to work in most fields. The profusion of fine fabrics at court comes partially from the labor of unmarriageable women, as fibercraft is one of the few professions open to them, though sales and contracting is not, so they work in shops under the supervision of men. When I first arrived in Thryce, I paid little notice to King Lycius and Queen Thobal's son, Prince Caramon, or Little Kaye as his mother called him. He was barely over 60 years of age, a clever, active boy, and kind to his playmates. Unlike most boys his age, he gave his tutors trouble because he was paying too much rather than not enough attention. I remember feeling sorrow at the seeming inevitability of his being spoiled by the privilege and prejudice that surround him. Everything changed in his 11th year when he came down with Gorgon's curse. This terrible disease mainly affects children, paralyzing their limbs and often claiming their lives. By the time I was called in to aid his doctors, it was almost too late. Young Kaye lay terribly still, barely able to draw breath. The first thing I did was drive out the court physicians and their leeches, poultices, and terrifying notions about cutting open the body along with them. I did what little common sense and herbcraft would allow, and added in basic charms of renewal. I knew it wasn't enough, and I could see I was losing him. I still can't describe what came over me, but I just knew I had to save him. Over 7 days and 7 nights, I performed every healing rite and incantation I knew. I drew in more of the power at his bedside than in my entire life previous, and paid for it in headaches, cramps, exhausted insomnia, and, before the end, palsy, double vision, and auditory hallucinations. Kaye survived, but the disease took a hefty toll. His legs were left permanently paralyzed. The queen was grateful, and it may have been her favor that kept Lycius from sending me back to the order in disgrace, as the king appeared to be more bothered by his heir becoming a cripple than he would have been by Kaye's death. After all, Lycius had a healthy heir in waiting, a younger son, born 2 years prior. Lycius's attitude was shared by other noble families. Prince Caramon had been engaged to the daughter of a powerful noble family, the Wombardis, since he was 7 and she was 4, and they were to be married as soon as she reached adulthood. Mere months after Kaye's illness, Lord Wombard begged off the engagement, asking the king to release Myrthea that she might be engaged to Lord Hasimus's eldest son. Lycius granted the petition, though there was much gossip, as the houses of Wombard and Hasimus are the two most powerful outside the king's own, and Lord Hasimus was no friend of Lycius. As I labored to heal Kaye, I realized that he was at the center of the weirding in Thryce. Destiny pervaded the castle like a giant holding its breath. Something was going to happen, not might or should, but would. And when it did, it would suck in everything around it. As I poured my life into him, I could see more clearly the pattern of the weirding. The strange air that suffused the castle was running not into, but through him. The prince's weird was not that he would do great things or terrible things, but that he would enable someone else to do them. Who that person was or what they would do, I could not say. It seemed likely, however, that Kaye's ill fortune was closer to its beginning than its end. In order to perform healing magic on Kaye, I had to touch him barehanded. I'd also performed all of the tasks that any competent nurse or doctor would have, including bathing him and changing his sheets. Were he not still legally a child, I would have been guilty of a crime every time I touched him. Throughout his illness, I hardly wore my, by then, threadbare cotton gloves. Nonetheless, I somehow managed to get them blood-stained, possibly with my own blood. When I felt well enough to go shopping, I replaced them with brown silk embellished with only a lace fringe. They were several times the price of cotton, but I'd been saving money for new gloves every year. After his fever broke and the pain in his back and extremities subsided, Kaye was unsurprisingly depressed. I was called back to his bedside after an episode in which he refused to take food or drink for 3 days straight, and it needed no magic to get him to eat, just sympathy and a willingness to listen. Having dealt with partial paralysis before, I was able to reassure him that he need not be bedridden for the rest of his life, but that, with discipline and exercise, he could learn to walk with crutches and leg braces. The crutches were not a problem, but the appropriate kind of brace, sometimes called an iron boot because it holds the foot and knee in place, was unknown in Thryce. The incompetence of the royal doctors continued to amaze me. They had prescribed that he not exert himself, and had offered only the sedan chair as a mode of transport. I promised Kaye that if he would begin upper body exercises and resume his studies, I would immediately send for a set of proper leg braces. It was then that, at Queen Thobal's request, I became the prince's nurse and tutor. He applied himself to his rehabilitation with tight-lipped determination and approached his studies of language, astrology, philosophy, and geometry with almost as much resolution. Only in his study of courtly manners was he remiss, though the priest responsible for his religious education frequently complained of his pupil's inattention. It took 6 months to get the braces, but, inside of a year, he was able to move about the palace at the pace of a brisk walk safely and unaided. The queen, however, was taking no chances and assigned 3 strong guards to wait on him and, whenever he walked, to keep pace to his left, right, and behind him. I often walked with him, offering encouragement. I had no idea that his trials, and mine, were just beginning.
Visit BigWorldNetwork.com for more e-series samples, or sign up for a $3 a month subscription for full access to all written and audio e-series content, accessible from the website, mobile, or e-reader devices. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.